Good Wednesday morning. Let's have some coffee and let's read chapter 16 of Left Behind series, book 1. And I'll begin reading now. Chapter 16. I wouldn't do this for just anybody, Steve Plank said after he and Buck had thanked Marge and headed to separate cabs. I don't know how long I can hold them off and convince them I'm you pretending to be someone else. So don't be far behind. Don't worry. Steve took the first cab. Buck's George Oroskovich press credentials on his chest. He was to go directly to the Plaza Hotel, where he would ask for his appointment with Carpathia. Buck's hope was that Steve would be immediately arrested as Buck, and clear the way for Buck to get in. If Buck was accosted by authorities, he would show his identity as Steve Plank. Both knew the plan was flimsy, but Buck was willing to try anything to keep from being extradited and framed for Alan Tompkins' murder and possibly even Dirk Burton's. Buck asked his cabbie to wait about a minute after Steve had left for the plaza. He arrived at the hotel in the midst of flashing police lights, a paddy wagon, and several unmarked cars. As he threaded his way through the onlookers, the police hustled Steve, hands cuffed behind his back, out the door and down the steps. I'm telling you, Steve said, the name's Oroskovich. We know who you are, Williams. Save your breath. That's not Cam Williams, another reporter said, pointing and laughing. You idiots, that's Steve Plank. Yeah, that's it, Plank joined in. I'm Williams's boss from the Weekly. Sure you are, a plainclothesman said, stuffing him into an unmarked car. Buck ducked the reporter, who had recognized Plank, but when he got inside and picked up a courtesy phone to call Rosenzweig's room, another press colleague, Eric Miller, whirled around and covered his own phone, whispering, Williams, what's going on? The cops just shuttled your boss out of here, claiming he was you. Do me a favor, Buck said. Sit on this for at least half an hour. You owe me that. I owe you nothing, Williams, Miller said, but you look scared enough. Give me your word you'll tell me first what's going on. All right, you'll be the first press guy I tell anyway. Can't promise I won't tell someone else. Who? Nice try. If you're trying to call Carpathia, Cameron, you can forget it. We've been trying all night. He's not giving any more interviews tonight. Is he back? He's back, but he's in I can't say this word. Income and anyway. Rosenzweig answered Buck's call. Chaim, it's Cameron Williams. May I come up? Eric Miller slammed his phone down and moved close. Cameron, Rosenzweig said, I can't keep up with you. First you're dead, then you're alive. We just got a call that you had been arrested in the lobby and would be questioned about a murder in London. Buck didn't want Miller to detect anything. Chaim, I have to move quickly. I'll be using the name Plank, all right? I'll arrange it with Nikolai and get him to my room somehow. You come. He told Buck the number. Buck put a finger to his lips so Miller wouldn't ask, but he couldn't shake him. He jogged to the elevator, but Eric stepped on with him. The couple tried to join them. I'm sorry, folks, Buck said. This car is malfunctioning. The couple left, but Miller stayed. Buck didn't want him to see what floor he was going to, so he waited till the door shut and turned the car off. He grabbed Miller's shirt at the neck and pressed him against the wall. Listen, Eric, I told you I'd call you first with what's shaking here, but if you try to horn in on this or follow me, I'm going to leave you dry. Miller shook loose and straightened his clothes. All right, Williams, geez, lighten up. Yeah, I lighten up and you come snooping around. That's my job, man. Don't forget that. Mine too, Eric, but I don't follow other people's leads. I make my own. You interviewing Carpathia? Just tell me that. No, I'm risking my life to see if a movie star's in the house. So it's Carpathia then, really? I didn't say that. Come on, man, let me in on it. I'll give you anything. You said Carpathia wasn't giving any more interviews tonight, Buck said, and he's not giving any more to anybody except the networks and national outlets, so I'll never get to him. That's your problem. Williams! Buck reached for Miller's throat again. I'm going, Eric said. When Buck emerged at the VIP floor, he was astounded to see that Miller had somehow beat him there and was hurriedly introducing himself to a uniformed guard as Steve Plank. Mr. Rosenzweig is waiting for you, sir, the guard said. Wait a minute, Buck shouted, showing Steve's press credentials. I'm Plank. Run this impostor off. The guard put a hand on each man. You'll both have to wait here while I call the house detective. Buck said, just call Rosenzweig and have him come out here. The guard shrugged and punched in the room number on a cordless phone. Miller leaned in, saw the number, and sprinted toward the room. Buck took off after him, the unarmed guard yelling and still trying to reach someone on the phone. Buck, younger and in better shape, overtook Miller and tackled him in the hallway, causing doors up and down the corridor to open. Take your brawl somewhere else, a woman shouted. Buck yanked Miller to his feet and put him in a headlock. You are a clown, Eric. You really think Rosenzweig would let a stranger into his room? I could sweet talk my way into anywhere, Buck, and you know you would do the same thing. Problem is, I already did. Now beat it. The guard caught up with them. Dr. Rosenzweig will be out in a minute. I have just one question for him, Miller said. No, you don't, Buck said. He turned to the guard. He doesn't. Let the old man decide, the guard said, then just as suddenly stepped aside, pulling Buck and Miller with him to clear the hall. There, sweeping past them, were 4 men in dark suits surrounding the unmistakable Nikolai Carpathia. Excuse me, gentlemen, Carpathia said. Pardon me. Oh, Mr. Carpathia, sir. I mean President Carpathia, Miller called out. Sir, Carpathia said, turning to face him. The bodyguards glowered. Oh, hello, Mr. Williams, Carpathia said, noticing Buck. Or should I say Mr. Oris Skofik? Or should I say Mr. Plank? The interloper stepped forward, Eric Miller from Seaboard Monthly. I know it well, Mr. Miller, Carpathia said, but I am late for an appointment. If you will call me tomorrow, I will talk to you by phone. Fair enough? Miller looked overwhelmed. He nodded and backed away. I thought you said your name was Plank, the guard said, causing everyone but Miller to smile. Come on in, Buck, Carpathia said, motioning him to follow. Buck was silent. That is what they call you, is it not? Yes, sir, Buck said, certain that not even Rosenzweig knew that. Rayford felt terrible about Hattie Durham. Things couldn't have gone worse. Why hadn't he just let her work his flight? She'd have been none the wiser, and he could have eased into his real reason for inviting her to dinner Thursday night. Now he had spoiled everything. How would he get to Chloe now? His real motive, even for talking with Hattie, was to communicate to Chloe. Hadn't she seen enough yet? Shouldn't he be more encouraged by her insistence on replacing the stolen DVD? He asked if she wanted to go to New York with him for the overnight trip. She said she'd rather stay home and start looking into internet classes. He wanted to push, but he didn't dare. After she had gone to bed, he called Bruce Barnes and told him his frustrations. You're trying too hard, Rayford, the younger man said. I should think telling other people about our faith would be easier than ever now, but I've run into the same kind of resistance. It's really hard when it's your own daughter. I can imagine, Bruce said. No, you can't, Rayford said, but it's all right. Chaim Rosenzweig was in a beautiful suite of rooms. The bodyguards were posted out front, while Carpathia invited Rosenzweig and Buck into a private parlor for a meeting of just the three of them. Carpathia shed his coat and laid it carefully across the back of the couch. Make yourselves comfortable, gentlemen, he said. I do not need to be here, Nikolai Rosenzweig whispered. Oh, nonsense, Doctor, Carpathia said. You do not mind, do you, Buck? Not at all. You do not mind my calling you Buck, do you? No, sir. But usually it's just people at your magazine. Yes, I know. They call you that because you buck the traditions and the trends and the conventions. Am I right? Yes, but how? Buck, this has been the most incredible day of my life. I have felt so welcome here, and the people have seemed so receptive to my proposals. I am overwhelmed. I shall go back to my country a happy and satisfied man. But not soon. I have been asked to stay longer. Did you know that? I heard. It is amazing, is it not, that all those different international meetings right here in New York over the next few weeks are all about the worldwide cooperation in which I am interested? It is, Buck said, and I've been assigned to cover them. Then we will be getting to know each other better. I look forward to that, sir. I was most moved at the UN today. Thank you. And Dr. Rosenzweig has told me so much about you. As he has told me much about you. There was a knock at the door. Carpathia looked pained. I had hoped we would not be disturbed. Rosenzweig rose slowly and shuffled to the door in a subdued conversation. He slipped back to Buck. We'll have to give him a couple of minutes, Cameron, he whispered, for an important phone call. Oh no, Carpathia said. I will take it later. This meeting is a priority for me. Sir, Rosenzweig said, begging your pardon, it is the President. The President of the United States. Buck rose quickly to leave with Rosenzweig, but Carpathia insisted they stay. I am not such a dignitary that I would not share this honor with my old friend and my new friend. Sit down. They sat, and he pushed the speaker button on the phone. This is Nikolai Carpathia speaking. Mr. Carpathia, this is Gerald Fitzhugh. Mr. President, I am honored to hear from you. Well, hey, it's good to have you here. I appreciated your note of congratulations on my presidency, sir, and your immediate recognition of my administration. Boy, that was a heck of a thing, how you took over there. I wasn't sure what had happened at first, but I don't suppose you were either. That is exactly right. I am still getting used to it. Well, take it from a guy who's been in the saddle for 6 years. You don't ever get used to it. You just develop calluses in the right places, if you know what I mean. Yes, sir. Listen, the reason I called is this. I know you're going to be here a little longer than you expected, so I want you to spend a night or two here with me and Wilma. Can you do that? In Washington? Right here at the White House. That would be such a privilege. We'll have somebody talk to your people about the right time, but it's got to be soon because Congress is in session and I know they'll want to hear from you. Carpathia shook his head, and Buck thought he seemed overcome emotionally. I would be more than honored, sir. Speaking of something that was a heck of a thing, your speech today and your interview tonight, well, that was something. Look forward to meeting you. The feeling is mutual, sir. Buck was only a little less overcome than Carpathia and Rosenzweig. He had long since lost his awe of U.S. presidents, especially this one, who insisted on being called Fritz. He had done a Newsmaker of the Year piece on Fitzhugh, Buck's first, Fitz second. On the other hand, it wasn't every day that the president called the room in which you sat. The glow of the call seemed to stay with Carpathia, but he quickly changed the subject. Buck, I want to answer all the questions and give you whatever you need. You have been so good to Chaim, and I am prepared to give you a bit of a secret. You would call it a scoop. But first, you are in deep trouble, my friend, and I want to help you if I can. Buck had no idea how Carpathia knew he was in trouble, so he wouldn't even have to bring him up to speed and ask for his help. This was too good to be true. The question was, what did Carpathia know and what did he need to know? The Romanian sat forward and looked directly into Buck's eyes. That gave Buck such a feeling of peace and security that he felt free to tell him everything. Everything. Even that his friend Dirk had tipped him off about someone meeting with Stonikel and Todd Cothran, and Buck's assuming it was Carpathia. It was I, Carpathia said, but let me make this very clear. I know nothing of any conspiracy. I have never even heard of such a thing. Mr. Stonikel felt it would be good for me to meet some of his colleagues and men of international influence. I formed no opinions about any of them, neither am I beholden to any of them. I will tell you something, Mr. Williams. I believe your story. I do not know you except by your work and your reputation with people I respect, such as Dr. Rosenzweig. But your account has the ring of truth. I have been told that you are wanted in London for the murder of Scotland Yard agent, and that they have several witnesses who will swear they saw you distract Tompkins, plant the device, and activate it from within the pub. That's crazy. Well, of course it is, if you were mourning the mysterious death of your mutual friend. That's exactly what we were doing, Mr. Carpathia, that and trying to get to the bottom of it. Rosenzweig was called to the door again. Then he whispered in Carpathia's ear, Buck, come here, Carpathia said, rising and leading Buck toward a window away from Rosenzweig. Your plan to get in here while being pursued was most ingenious, but your boss has been identified and now they know you are here. They would like to take you into custody and extradite you to England. If that happens and Tompkins' theory is right, Buck said, I'm a dead man. You believe they will kill you? They killed Burton and they killed Tompkins. I'm much more dangerous to them with my potential readership. If this plot is as you and your friends say it is, Cameron, writing about these people, exposing them will not protect you. I know, maybe I should do it anyway. I don't see any way out. I can make this go away for you. Buck's mind was suddenly reeling. This was what he had wanted, but he had feared Carpathia could do nothing quickly enough to keep him from getting into Todd Cothran's and Sullivan's hands. Was it possible Carpathia was in deeper with these people than he had let on? Sir, I need your help, but I am a journalist first. I can't be bought or bargained with. Oh, of course not. I would never ask such a thing. Let me tell you what I can do for you. I will arrange to have the London tragedies revisited and reevaluated, exonerating you. How will you do that? Does it matter if it's the truth? Buck thought a moment. It is the truth, of course. But how will you do that? You have maintained this innocence. Mr. Carpathia, this man from nowhere persona. How can you affect what has happened in London? Carpathia sighed. Buck, I told you your friend Dirk was wrong about a conspiracy. That is true. I am not in bed with Todd Cothran or Stonigal or any of the other international leaders. I have been honored to meet recently. However, there are important decisions and actions coming up that will affect them, and it is my privilege to have a say in those developments. Buck asked Carpathia if he minded if they sat down again. Carpathia signaled to Rosenzweig to leave them for a few minutes. Look, Buck said when they were seated, I'm a young man, but I've been around the block. It feels to me as if I'm about to find out just how deep into this, well, if it's not a conspiracy, it's something organized. How deep into this thing you are. I can play along and save my life, or I can refuse and you let me take my chances in London. Carpathia held up a hand and shook his head. Buck, let me reiterate that we are talking politics and diplomacy, not skullduggery or crime. I'm listening. First, Carpathia said, a little background. I believe in the power of money. Do you? No. You will. I was a better than average businessman in Romania while still in secondary school. I studied at night many languages, the ones I needed to succeed. During the day, I ran my own import and export businesses and made myself wealthy. But what I thought was wealth was paltry compared to what was possible. I needed to learn that. I learned it the hard way. I borrowed millions from a European bank, then found that someone in that bank informed my major competitor what I was doing. I was defeated at my own game, defaulted on my loan, and was struggling. Then that same bank bailed me out and ruined my rival. I didn't mean to or want to hurt the rival. He was used by the bank to lock me into a relationship. Was that bank owned by an influential American? Carpathia ignored the question. What I had to learn in just over a decade is how much money is out there. Out there? In the banks of the world, especially those owned by Jonathan Stonigal, Buck suggested. Carpathia still wasn't biting. That kind of capital is power. This is the kind of thing I write against. It is about to save your life. I'm still listening. That kind of money gets a man's attention. He becomes willing to make concessions for it. He begins to see the wisdom of letting someone else, a younger man, someone with more enthusiasm and vigor and fresh vision, take over. That's what happened in Romania. Buck, do not insult me. The former president of Romania asked me of his own free will to replace him, and the support for that move was unanimous within the government and almost totally favorable among the masses. Everyone is better off. The former president is out of power. He lives in luxury. Buck could not breathe. What was Carpathia implying? Buck stared at him, unable to move, unable to respond. Carpathia continued. Secretary General Nuego presides over a country that is starving. The world is ripe for my plan of 10 members of the Security Council. These things will work together. The Secretary General must devote his time to the problems within Botswana. With the right incentive, he will do that. He will be a happy, prosperous man with a happy and prosperous people. But first, he will endorse my plan for the Security Council. The representatives from each of the 10 will be an interesting mix. Some current ambassadors, but mostly new people with good financial backgrounds and progressive ideas. Are you telling me you will become Secretary General of the UN? I would never seek such a position, but how could I refuse such an honor? Who could turn his back on such an enormous responsibility? How much say will you have about who represents each of the 10 permanent members of the Security Council? I will merely be there to provide servant leadership. Are you aware of that concept? One leads by serving, not by dictating. Let me take a wild guess, Buck said. Todd Cawthorn is in line for a role on your new Security Council. Carpathia sat back as if learning something. Would that not be interesting, he said. A non-politician, a brilliant financial mind, one who was wise enough and kind enough and globally minded enough to allow the world to go to a three-currency system that did not include his own pound sterling. He brings no baggage to such a role. The world would have a certain level of comfort with him, would they not? I suppose they would, Buck said, his mind black with depression as if he was losing his soul before his very eyes. Unless, that is, Todd Cawthorn were in the middle of a mysterious suicide, a car bombing, that sort of a thing. Carpathia smiled. I should think a man in a position of international potential like that would want a very clean house just now. And you could affect that? Buck, you overestimate me. I am just saying that if you are right, I might try to stop what is clearly an unethical and illegal action against an innocent man. You. I cannot see how there is anything wrong with that. Rayford still could not sleep. For some reason, he was overcome anew with grief and remorse over the loss of his wife and son. He slid out of bed and onto his knees, burying his face in the sheet on the side where his wife used to sleep. He had been so tired, so tense, so worried about Chloe that he had pushed from his heart and mind and soul his terrible loss. He believed totally that his wife and son were in heaven, and he knew they were better off than they had ever been. Rayford knew he had been forgiven for mocking his wife, for never really listening, for having ignored God for so many years. He was grateful, and he had been given a second chance, and that he now had new friends and a place to learn the Bible. But that didn't stop the aching emptiness in his heart, the longing to hold his wife and son, to kiss them and tell them how much he loved them. He prayed for the grief to lessen, but part of him wanted it, needed it to remain. In a way, he felt he deserved this pain. Though he knew better, he was beginning to understand the forgiveness of God, and Bruce had told him that he needn't continue to feel shame over sin that had been dealt with. As Rayford knelt praying and weeping, a new anguish flooded over him. He felt hopeless about Chloe. Everything he had tried had failed. He knew it had been only days since the disappearance of her mother and brother, and even less time since his own conversion. What more could he say or do? Bruce had encouraged him just to pray, but he was not made that way. He would pray, of course, but he had always been a man of action. Now every action seemed to push her farther away. He felt that if he said or did anything more, he would be responsible for her deciding against Christ once and for all. Rayford had never felt more powerless and desperate. How he longed to have Irene and Ramey with him right then, and how he despaired over Chloe. He had been praying silently, but the torment welled up within him, and despite himself, he heard his own muffled cries. Chloe, oh Chloe, Chloe. He wept bitterly in the darkness, suddenly jarred by a creak and a footstep. He turned quickly to see Chloe, the dim light from her room silhouetting her robed form in the doorway. He didn't know what she had heard. "Are you all right, Dad?" she asked quietly. "Yeah." "Nightmare?" "No. I'm sorry to disturb you." "I miss them too," she said, her voice quavery. Rayford turned and sat with his back to the bed. He held his arms open to her. She came and sat next to him, letting him hold her. "I believe I'll see them again some day," he said. "I know you do," she said, no disrespect in her voice. "I know you do." And that is the end of chapter 16, and we will be reading chapter 17 next. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day, and you're free to go.